We're going to spend the next 4 Sundays talking about others. More to the point, the other. And by the other, we mean anyone different from us who makes us somehow nervous. The basis of the book is Fear of the Other by Dr. Willimon, a man, of course, who I have no familiarity with whatsoever. I once was at a meeting where he led a discussion in the coffee time afterwards. I said, "Is it true that it's illegal to have a Methodist publication without you in it?" And he didn't seem to think that was funny. I thought it was hilarious, but I always thought my stuff was funny. The book is easily available on Amazon. And I mean, you can probably order it now and it'll be there when you get home. I don't know, because even if Alexa heard you talking about it and ordered it for you, I don't know how that goes. But it would be helpful to have it, just to be set on where we are. We will be following the chapters in sequence. The first chapter and the introduction are called Saved by the Other. And it begins, oh, come on. Oh, if you're going to be that way, be that way. I'll fix it. With this from 1 John. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear because fear expects punishment. The person who is afraid has not been made perfect in love. We love because God first loved us. If anyone says, "I love God," and hates his brother or sister, he is a liar, because the person who doesn't love a brother or sister who can be seen can't love God who can't be seen. This is the commandment we have from him. Those who claim to love God ought to love their brother and their sister also. Now, if you want the Cliff Note version of the next 5 weeks, that's it. And if from time to time, as I've been often, those of you who've been through this before, you wonder where in the devil he is going, just go back and read that and go, oh, that's what we're doing. Okay. I would like to begin with another scripture of sorts. This was a song written and recorded by Chris Christopherson somewhere in the early 70s, 1972 to 1975. And as I look around the room, many of you were alive at that point. I mentioned that to another group, and nobody was alive. But we are who we are. And it came off an album called Jesus Was a Capricorn, interestingly enough. And here are the verses. Jesus was a Capricorn. He ate organic food. He believed in love and peace and never wore no shoes. Long hair, beard, and sandals, and a funky bunch of friends. Reckon we'd just nail him up if he came down again. And then it goes, there's a chorus that I'll get to in just a second. Then he goes to the next one. Eggheads cussing it's really fussing. Eggheads fussing rednecks, cussing hippies for their hair. Others laugh at straights, who laugh at freaks, who laugh at squares. Some folks hate the whites, who hate the blacks, who hate the Klan. Most of us hate anything that we don't understand. Then it goes to the chorus, which is repeated. Because everybody's got to have somebody to look down on, who they can feel better than at any time they please. Someone doing something dirty, decent folks can frown on. If you can't find somebody else, then help yourself to me. Now, I bring that up because it talks about two things that are very important for this conversation. One, the person of Jesus. Two, our relationship one with the other. Okay? I was sitting there at 9 o'clock worship this morning as the service was getting ready to start, and suddenly noticed what was up on the screen. You know the deal, we believe that everyone's on a journey to God, yada yada. I don't know if you get to, most people don't get to the last paragraph. Why? Because they've seen it all before and nobody listens and nobody reads. This is what it says at the bottom. We freely admit that we do not have all the answers, but we believe that Jesus points the way. I fear at times we lose track of Jesus. We theologize Jesus out of existence. It's interesting that Paul never mentions anything in Jesus' life. By the way, in the Apostles' Creed, you know, Jesus is born, and then what? He's crucified. What does that leave out? Oh, only everything he did and said. What was that about? Okay. So it's central to try and figure out who Jesus was and what the intent of Jesus was. And if you're going to claim the name and follow, it might be good to at least begin to try to act like Jesus acted. That's the premise, okay? Now, we're not here to talk about other people's sins. The internet can do that for you. We gather to consider our own lives and our own attitudes. Much of our separation is based on fear. Not necessarily, although we think it's fear of them, it's not really necessarily a fear of them. It is a fear that we might lose something. Our place, our status, yada yada. I grew up in South Texas, way South Texas. Incredibly South Texas. Okay, I grew up 15 miles from the border. Needless to say, the balance between Hispanic Anglo was not equal. 80% to 20%. Okay? And yet, I was a senior in high school before a Hispanic was ever elected to the school board. Oh, why was that? Because if they are, I lose something. That's part of the issue that we're dealing with. Okay? The goal of this study is to grapple with our divisions theologically and to deal with our personal responses, what I'm responsible for, rather than them. The fact is, I can't fix them. Okay? Lord knows I've tried. I worked on some of you people for about 16 years. And it didn't work. But anyway, that's another story. So that's what we're doing. This comes from David Brooks in his book, I think it's his last book, called The Second Mountain. The foundation layer of American society, the network of relationships and commitments and trust that the state and the market and everything else relies on is failing, and the results are as bloody as any war. Maybe it's time that we began to see this as a war. On the one side are the forces that sow division, discord, and isolation. On the other are all the forces in society that nurture attachment, connection, and solidarity. It is as if we are witnessing this vast showdown between the social rippers and social weavers. And here's the hard part of the war. It's not between one group of good people and another group of bad people. The war runs down the middle of every heart. Most of us are part of the problem we complain about. Come on, don't fight me. From Alexander Solzhenitsyn in his book, The Gulag Archipelago. The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor political parties, but right through every human heart. And that's what we're dealing with. Richard Rohr. Who knows Richard Rohr's name? Huh? Good, good. Contemplative, author, all-around good guy. Okay. There is no completely pure place to stand, it seems, and before we can resolve an issue in any depth, we must honestly name and accept this imperfection. It is the egoing, and if you want to try and type something on a computer, type that word in, it drives them nuts. It goes going, whatever. Okay. It is the egoing illusion of our own perfect rightness that often allows us to crucify others. Okay? Finally, we get to Willimon. This is on page 3 of the book. Any Christian move toward the other is based upon Jesus Christ's move toward us. We were reconciled to God through the death of his Son while we were still enemies. That is the crucial point for this discussion. Okay? Now, it's a video of about 15 minutes. Mr. Willimon and a young lady whose name escapes me at this moment, and they discuss several occasions when they dealt with the other. And I find this. I think you'll find this helpful. Here are the questions that I want you to consider while you're watching, and we hope we'll have some time to talk about this later. First, what did you hear? What came to mind or stood out to you in this conversation? And what does it mean to say all of us are immigrants to the Christian faith? Okay? Do it if you would, Miss M.
When I was 16, my church sent me to a youth conference at Lake Chinook, North Carolina. And when I got there, one of the organizers, a woman, said to me, "You're a nice young man. Would you be willing to room with a person from another race?" And I said, "Yeah," thinking, "I'm a nice young man." Yeah. So I walked into the room there, and there, sitting on the bed, was another 16-year-old, an African American. We met and found out we were from the same town, Greenville, South Carolina. And so I don't remember anything about the conference sessions or what the theme was or anything, but I do remember that last night, Saturday night, he and I began talking after things and the sessions. And we talked about growing up in Greenville. And we both played ball. He played on the field 4 blocks from mine. We were both Methodist. His Methodist church was about 6 blocks across town from mine. His high school, half a mile from mine. And it was clear that, to paraphrase Langston Hughes, his Greenville was never Greenville to me. And I remember during the course of conversations, he said, "Does it bother you that you get on your Greenville City bus every day and there's a big sign there saying South Carolina law, white patrons sit from the front of the bus, black patrons, colored patrons sit from the rear of the bus?" And I said, "I've never thought about it." And he said, "You never thought about it?" He said, "Well, what do people discuss about that?" And I said, "Gosh, I've never heard it discussed." And he said, "That bothers me." Well, by the time that dawn came, that young man had skillfully, so patiently, opened up my world, opened up my eyes. It was almost like Paul in the Damascus Road. The scales fell off of my eyes. I could see when I walked out that morning out of that room. I wasn't living in the same world I lived in just the day before. It was my kind of life-changing, born-again kind of experience of being ministered unto by someone who was other than I was, someone whom I regarded as another. When we parted, we embraced, and I thanked him, and he said, I really enjoyed being with you. He said, when you walked in that room, and I looked at you, I was scared to death. And I said, really? So it was my kind of life-changing experience of both being another to somebody else and sensing that, and also having another encounter and guide me.
In 2008, a delegation was going to Palestine and Israel, part of this GBGM delegation. And I remember I'm at my office and I get a call. There's this trip in 3 weeks to Israel, Palestine. Would you be interested to go? We have a scholarship and all costs will be covered. And it'd be a great opportunity, I think, for you and for the trip and for the people in the trip. And of course, what did I do? I had always wanted to go to the Holy Land. I had these dreams of the Holy Land. And so I said yes. They said, we'll send you resources. The group that's going has been studying, has been meeting for a couple months. We'll send you stuff. I was so wrapped up in getting work done at the office leading up to the trip that I didn't do the work I had to do or really studied what I was going into. And so as you're sharing, I think about that trip, that 12-hour flight into Israel. And while I was born and raised in Chicago, of Guatemalan parents, and I've experienced many things and fears of others or others fearing me and my family, it's interesting what happened to me there. I had not realized just how different I was from the other 85 people in that trip. I was a little darker, significantly younger, but it wasn't until I was in a bus of the many tour buses, and somehow I managed to sit in the back seat at one of the security points. At every security point, there was a man in uniform or a woman in uniform who would enter the bus, walk through every single person, and stop to me and ask me, U.S. passport, what is your name? Are you a terrorist? Why are you here? And I remember just feeling so scared for myself among another 40 Christians, scared for my life because I was in another country, but then looking into the eyes of this 18-year-old who truly was just doing his job. Mm-hmm. And so I showed everything, and as scared as I was, this 25-year-old freaking out and not realizing what I was into, the bus, they looked at my stuff, they got off the bus, and there we went. We got to Bethlehem. And then I thought, oh my goodness, we're in the Palestinian territory. I should be really scared. And as we got off the bus, we were greeted by people in Bethlehem. And the first question I got from a young man was, you're not afraid of us? You're not afraid of me? And I'll tell you, well, it's interesting because while I was so scared on that bus as I was being questioned, not realizing that I probably looked Palestinian, I did not feel more at home than the way that I felt in Bethlehem. And it was a young man who asked me, are you not scared of me? Following a young woman, probably 13, 14, saying to me, are you Palestinian? You're Palestinian. And, no, I'm Guatemalan. You're Palestinian. No, but I think I'm Guatemalan. No, your parents are refugees. You're one of us. And I share the story with you because that was an experience for me that transformed me. Started with fear, and then I entered into an area with a lot of conflict, and they embraced me in a way that, as I hear you talk, I don't remember every single trip we made or every panel, every conversation, but I remember that 13-year-old, and I remember that man who asked me, you're not scared of us? And the other who tried convincing me, you're one of us. So why this book? Why now?
Well, last year when the book came out, at the end of the year, dictionary.com voted xenophobia as the word of the year. In our national political discourse, for instance, there seemed to be a lot of talk about of fear. We're in a bad situation in the nation. We've got to be careful. Our borders are unguarded. Bad hombres are coming in, and this kind of political discourse was occurring. And it seemed to me in the church, I was hearing a lot of people say, what is this? How can we think as Christians about this sense of other? And I confess, I probably have not done much discipline, focused thinking myself on the significance of fear of the other. So this gave me an opportunity to do it. And I wanted to reflect as a Christian, and I wanted to try to reflect in a biblical way. Do Christians look upon these matters? Do we enter these discussions in any particular way? And so I wrote the book, I think, to help foster this discussion in the church and to portray the church as a wonderful setting for talking about these issues in a faithful Christian way.
In the book, you talk about exclusion and political allergies to those that aren't as important. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, it occurs to me that one thing we do in the church is we talk and we get to know people. It's church is a kind of intimate gathering. It's of the nature of the Christian faith that Jesus Christ brings people together. And they're brought together not on the basis of sharing the same gender or class or social class or race. They're brought together simply because that's what Jesus does. He brings people together. So it seemed to me that there was discussion about issues of immigration and borders and people of other faiths in the political sphere, but it seemed to me that the Christian faith, Christ, gives us ways of really talking about these in deep ways. And also, and I mentioned repeatedly that I think this is so important, actually encountering one another down deep, listening to one another's stories, interacting, asking questions, having ourselves checked out by one another. And here, so I'm really affirming the church is a great place for processing these matters.
So, Will, why is Jesus not what we expected?
I think I can demonstrate from Scripture that Jesus was resisted and eventually crucified in great part because he was not the Messiah, not the God that we expected. For instance, one of the chief persistent charges against Jesus by his critics was, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. The implication being, if he were really Messiah, if he were really the Son of God, he would know who sinners are and he would keep as far away from them and condemn them as he could. Jesus didn't. He kept fraternizing, partying, going from one dinner party to the next with sinners. And some of those sinners happened to be some of the religious leaders, biblically knowledgeable people of the day, and some of those sinners happened to be the tax collectors and all. And I think Jesus was greatly resisted in great part because of his wide embrace of those, his salvation, if you will, of people that we thought couldn't be saved, that nobody wanted saved. He kept reaching out, embracing, even on the cross, embracing those that were considered outside the bounds. Outside the bounds of God's love. So, and you see this continuing. In fact, the whole New Testament, Paul's letters just throb with this recognition. Wow, So our Messiah has gone even to the Gentiles, even to the pagans. Wow. We got to think what's going on here. I guess we thought God was kind of Israel's property, Israel's patron. Wow, God is a bigger God even than we first thought. And that foundational awareness is, I think, just right at the heart of the shock and the joy of who Jesus is. And like your comment about meeting the God we didn't expect in Jesus, it's a basic Christian claim that God came to us as another, that we thought God was our enemy. God's up there keeping score. No, you messed up again. Sorry, that's against you. No, you got a bad grade on this exam and you failed this test. That was sort of our image of God until we met Jesus Christ. And we believe, and this is kind of a paraphrase of Paul in a number of places where he said, remember, you were outside. You were the enemies of God. You were the rebels. Paul says to his fellow Jews, we had all the scriptures. We had all the commandments. We knew the prophetic truth, and yet we disobeyed, we rebelled, and yet God did not give up on us. God did not break God's promises to us. God sent us Christ. So a Christian remembers that the greatest foe of the love of God is not this threatening other, but is me. And that is part of the joy, and at times the kind of pain and discomfort of being a Christian. I teach a class in mission at Divinity School, and one thing we know is that everybody has had to become a Christian. None of us are born Christian. Somebody had to tell us the story, somebody had to teach us the words, show us the way. In other words, all of us are immigrants into the Christian faith. There wasn't anybody who can claim to be a native. There is no native-born Christian. And we've experienced that, and thank God somebody loved us enough to say, let me tell you the truth about God and the truth about you. You are God's beloved child. This is your good news. So having had that experience, we can be that way towards others.
So what do you hope participants get from this study?
I would hope a renewed joy and enthusiasm for what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. A renewed gratitude that I, who was outside, have been brought inside by Christ's love. I have been chosen for Him. I've been given an assignment, a vocation. I hope that would be there. And then also to let Christ lead us into the adventure of encounter with those whom my world teaches me to regard as a threat or the other. I know we say in Christian mission, Jesus Christ is going to be jumping over every boundary. He is going to be knocking down every barrier, every wall, he is determined to save the world. That's not under dispute. The question is, will you be there with him? Will you get to be part of that joy? So I hope the book is an invitation to that wonderful joy to go with Jesus and to be there.
So as I hear you, I'm still thinking about what you said. There is no doubt that Jesus will always be present with those that the world may see as other. There have been others to even Jesus as a God. There's no doubt in that. But you said the question, and I think in answering your hope, but also takeaway for this Bible study is, where will we be in that work? Where will we be in that journey? And are we willing to really live more in fear of love, be less in fear and live more in love? Mm-hmm. And as we do that, can I see me? Can I see God through the other? Because the other may see God through me. I gotta tell you what, I really look forward to the next 5 weeks in the study.
Oh, I do too. think Jesus is pushing us on a road to victory.
Yeah, so let's go with it. Thank you.
Is somebody going to... Oh. You going to push the button, Steve, to switch it back over?
I know how.
Okay.
You on? Yep.
Bingo. Thank you. A story that this reminded me of. I was, years ago, I was teaching a class, and we were just talking back and forth. And the idea of universal salvation came up. And I, being young and foolish, suggested, I don't know for sure, but it seems to me that what I'm going to get, everybody's going to get. Well, this enraged this one particular lady who said, well, John, there's just some people I don't want to be in heaven with. And my response was, well, they probably feel pretty much the same way about you. But needless to say, that relationship did not necessarily go anywhere. What did you hear in that? Not everybody at once. Back off. Okay. What? Somebody. Yeah.
The line that follows the first question, all of us are immigrants to the Christian faith. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it never occurred to me before. It's just like he was talking about the sign in the front of the bus.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to him before. It's just, we assume, and we can't assume.
To get back to what I said much earlier, the interesting thing about growing up in South Texas was, and about that whole school board business, none of us ever questioned that.
Right.
It's just the way it was. Right? And why would we? I mean, we were the beneficiaries. Others. Any others? Yeah.
John, one thing that stood out to me that probably all of us, or at least I'm a big sufferer of, the go along to get along.
Uh-huh.
And the go along to get along really does throw up a blind eye.
Sure.
Trying to satisfy everybody, but satisfying nobody, including yourself.
Well, or at least picking sides. It happens in every realm. Church, politics, business, you name it. Okay? You may have a stance that you hold to particularly strongly, but you keep your mouth shut because it's not going to help me any at this point. Or I'm doing fine keeping my mouth shut. Okay. Anyway, let's move a bit here. This is on page 7 if you have a book, but if you don't, it doesn't matter. Xenophobic, exclusionary fear of the other is more than a matter of preference for people whom we enjoy hanging out with, or those with whom we feel most comfortable. In deep fear of the other, we separate ourselves from others in order to better oppress, exploit, expose, confine, hurt, or deny justice and access to others whom we have judged to be so. To be so other as to be beyond the bounds of having any bond between us or any claim upon us. I have been doing a bit of reading of late, or over the last year or two, on bits of American history that, oddly enough, did not get taught when I was going to high school or grade school or anywhere else. And what I'm becoming aware of is that we were able to treat, when I say we, white people, were able to treat people of other color grossly. And then you say, and I have a real good friend who is my personal trainer. I give him money to hurt me, and which is an interesting relationship. And he is African American, and he asked me one time, because we've gotten to be real good friends over the years, and he said, "John, how could that happen?" And I said, "Well, you have to start off by making them less than you are in your mind. And if they are less, then it's all right." And so what's the first step? The first step is to start off by saying, I've got good reason to believe that you're not as human as I am. Name calling, whatever else. Okay? Page 7. Christianity's default position is hospitality, even as we received hospitality on the cross of Christ. The default position is hospitality. The default position, redundancy is the soul of pedagogy. Okay? The focus is Jesus Christ. Why? Because we believe in Him. In Him, we see the intention of God. That's why we're here. Willimon writes, "We believe that we have seen as much of God as we ever hope to see in this world, in Jesus." Leslie Weatherhead, who was a British Methodist preacher in the 1940s, wrote, "Jesus is as much of God as you can see in human form." In other words, you're not going to see God, but you're going to see Jesus. And in what Jesus does, says, how Jesus acts, what Jesus calls us to do, we sense the intention of God. To the extent that we ignore the intent of Jesus, we ignore the intent of God. And so what we have made a practice of doing in self-defense of ourselves, because we will take care of ourselves. Trust me, I've done this for a long time, and I'm good at it. What we will do is we will create ways to look at other people that allow us to move them out of the category that makes them our responsibility. It's what we do, what we have done. America's history, by the way, is replete with such examples. Willimon again, "The self without Christ is tossed to and fro, constantly under threat. The self that must use everything and everyone in ceaseless acts of self-aggrandizement and self-defense. The self with Christ is recentered, given a new identity, and rests secure in God. It is Christ who lives in me," says Paul. That doesn't mean obliteration of our own selves, our old selves, but rather creates our new selves as God created us to be. Our new selves with a new basis other than our old selves. By the way, that's what it means to be, to use the old Baptist phrase, born again.